You are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support this show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Republicans already walking away from the second government shutdown threat, and apparently the wall. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris already inching away from her Medicare for All pledge. U.S. intel chiefs on a different page than Donald Trump. In fact, they're working apparently on a different book in a different bookstore on a slightly different planet.
Different printing press.
In an entirely different language. Meanwhile, Bill Barr confirmation is delayed for now. A vote won't come before Matt Whitaker has to testify in front of the Judiciary Committee. That makes that hearing a little more interesting.
He looks really relaxed about it.
Totally. And congratulations, America. The CEO of GoFundMe says that 1/3 of all fundraisers on his platform are for medical reasons.
Cool system.
U.S. has decided to give Venezuela's not president the key to all of Venezuela's bank accounts. Trump administration, meanwhile, locks the door on asylum seekers. And anti-vaxxers fuel a measles outbreak in Washington state. And remember that Wisconsin Foxconn deal? Well, it's even worse now than it was yesterday, which was worse than it was when it was signed, which was worse. You get the idea.
Which was worse than when Charlie Kirk touted it at Politicon.
Indeed. Contrary to Brazilian law, Lula kept from his brother's funeral as he stays in prison. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today. We have a full house. Everyone is here and healthy, which is shocking to me. Anyone I know who has a kid, their kid has been out sick at least one day over the past 2 weeks.
There's a bug going around?
Yeah, it's going around here. It's and with all the cold coming in, gosh, I don't know. It's a real mess, folks. We got to figure out what the hell is going on out there. That's what I'm saying.
The immune systems, it's unbelievable.
It's absolutely
it's crazy.
Unbelievable.
I heard a lot of people are switching because they're getting sick because of Nancy Pelosi.
So reports out today that the big border deal that was supposedly coming has already basically dissipated. Democrats are not planning on negotiating on behalf of DACA recipients, basically because they don't trust that Trump would actually provide a permanent fix in any way, right? That he will not follow through on a deal. You know, a lot of times we think of these things that, like, well, they'll sign it at the same time. But we have a lot of instances where, for instance, Mitch McConnell has made certain promises to bring up certain legislation and whatnot, and then it just goes away. And it's not a story because nobody's going to read a story that, oh, that didn't happen, period, end of story. Or people will read about it, but it's not going to be on cable news when that stuff never happens. It's going to be mentioned as an afterthought. And the Democrats simply do not believe that Trump is a good faith negotiator which I think is a fairly rational response. And so they won't make this deal. In the meantime, as we know, because the Supreme Court has not taken up any of the DACA cases, we're in a situation where DACA folks are protected for at least a year. It's still, I think, a horrible position to be in, incredibly stressful. There still makes it much harder for DACA recipients to function on a day-to-day basis in our society. But the imminent threat of deportation is not there at the moment. Same too, the TPS case still tied up in court. So I think the idea from the Democratic perspective is we have some leverage here. There's no reason to trust him to do something that we don't think he's going to do. And the fact of the matter is the Republicans got destroyed on this shutdown. They got destroyed. They realized that they caused a tremendous amount of suffering, frankly, in the country, stress amongst hundreds of thousands of workers. There are tens of thousands of workers who are not going to get their payback. I think there's an attempt in the House to pass a bill so that contractors will get back pay. But when we talk about contractors in this instance, what we're talking about are janitors, maybe cafeteria services at places like the museums in the city or government buildings in Washington, D.C. Those folks who really probably need it as much, if not more than any government people affected by this, at this point will not be getting back pay. That may change. So it turns out, not just a vacation. And I don't know how their bridge loans worked out that they were able to secure from their friendly banker down the street who they've done all this business with, who's so willing to give them money. So at this point, Trump is going to have to decide whether he will declare a national emergency or not. My guess is they're just going to sort of like pretend like none of this happened, because in 3 weeks, there will be something else that we'll be talking about that is so unbelievably ridiculous. Meanwhile, people are starting to dig in. Now that we are in a situation where we just went through the longest government shutdown we've ever experienced, where we have some places in national parks that will never recover for generations. They're talking about Joshua Tree National Park, where you have people who are going to feel the impact of having no money for that month come in for probably months. It'll probably take a year for people to sort of recover from that situation and not have it be something that they're dealing with, paying off credit card bills, worrying about, dealing with reshaping the things that they had jiggered around because of anxieties. Government agencies probably won't recover for another 18 months in terms of contracts that had to be put on hold, deadlines that were missed, et cetera, et cetera. So now that we've gone through all this, the question becomes, as Republicans are now too afraid to engage in it again, rightfully so, whether Donald Trump will declare a national emergency to build the wall. People are starting to look into his claims of why there needed to be a wall. And I think Rachel Maddow talked about this first a couple of nights ago. But we have a CNN clip that basically looks into this movie, Sicario 2, I guess. Sicario 2. And sees that a lot of what Donald Trump has been saying about the border seems to have come directly from this movie.
It's a great film.
Let's watch this clip.
Right? There are prayer rugs in the film. The president tweeted about prayer rugs found on the border from a story in the conservative Washington Examiner, which quotes an anonymous New Mexico rancher who had no evidence of the prayer rugs. The film also features terrorists who paid drug cartels to bring them into the country. Something else on the president's mind.
People are pouring into our country, including terrorists. We have terrorists. We caught 10 terrorists over the last very short period of time. 10. These are very serious people.
That claim appears to be the president accidentally or willfully misunderstanding a Customs and Border Patrol statistic that 10 suspected terrorists on average are blocked every day from entering the U.S., mostly by flying at locations worldwide. And then there's duct tape. The president has that on his mind, too.
They nab women, they grab them, they put tape over their mouth, they tie their hands. They have tape over their mouths, electrical tape, usually blue tape, as they call it.
10 times this month alone, counted the Washington Post.
Tying up women, putting tape in their mouth.
They tie up women, taping them up. Women are tied up, they're bound. They have women in the back seat of the cars with duct tape all over the place.
The president claimed women are duct tape shoved into vehicles driven across the border and sold. Those who work every day trying to protect vulnerable immigrants from sexual exploitation say duct tape isn't a thing.
We have a database of 1,435 indictments, and we went through all the indictments, and we found 26 cases that involved kidnapping. We did a search on duct tape, and we found one case of 1,435 cases that mentioned duct tape.
And that case was an American, not a migrant. In looking at all federal trafficking cases, most victims are U.S. citizens. Only about a third of trafficking cases are foreign nationals, and the vast majority of them enter the U.S. with legal visas. No duct tape.
What Donald Trump is missing with this sort of fictional account, Hollywood version of human trafficking, is the dire cases that do exist in the United States, including cases of forced labor and forced prostitution.
One incoming on your right. There are seen nothing. Contact right. I didn't see anything. Down.
One other highly dramatic possible Hollywood fascination the president has, those coming across the border have better cars and equipment than U.S. law enforcement.
They have the best vehicles you can buy. They have stronger, bigger, and faster vehicles than our police have, and then ICE has, and then Border Patrol has.
It doesn't exactly fit the second Sicario film. CNN and many news agencies have asked the White House.
All right, this is what kind of vehicles are coming in? Do they think that they're coming in?
Well, did you watch the documentary? Maybe you should do your research before you snark.
Now,
hopefully he will watch that movie if they can keep him up through it, because I don't want to freak people out with a spoiler, but the enemy might be within in that movie. It might be actually, I don't know.
This is like a fake on a fake on a fake. And the White House clearly understood that there was a problem here. And but I suspect what it is that, like, Stephen Miller could be just sitting there and describing this to the president as a way of getting on board. This could be like the wall, right? Which was just a way for him to remember to bring up immigration. Wall will always laugh loudly about immigration. There was something like that.
Oh no,
he could pronounce it. He could wrap his mind around it. It's perfect.
When did they take 2020 off the air? They should be covering that.
Apparently, Vox saw an email provided to them by a member with the Border Patrol, which was sent as a request for information by the Assistant Border Patrol Chief on behalf of the Office of Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin McLean, who is referred to internally as C1, and it asked agents to reply within less than 2 hours. They wanted the response within 2 hours. And it was the text of the email. The subject line was "Quick turnaround. RFI taped up women smuggled into the U.S. All. We require your assistance on a quick turnaround for C1." That was the commissioner.
Not done by ICE agents.
So the commissioner needs this. Commissioner needs this quick. Please forward any information that you have in any format regarding claims that, quote, traffickers tie up and silence women with tape before illegally driving them through the desert from Mexico to the United States in the backs of cars in windowless vans, which is exactly the language that Trump was using.
Bonus points if it mentions blue tape.
And reference the news article below for further info. That news article was a Washington Post article asking where are, here it is. Trump's stories of taped up women smuggled into U.S. are divorced from reality, experts say. So they were looking for anything that would in any way refute the idea that Trump's stories are divorced from reality. And it appears that he did not, that request was not fulfilled, or I'm sure we would have heard about it. There would have already been a special announcement from the White House.
It's blue duct tape, and maybe Nancy wants her MS-13 lovers to do that to her, but other Americans don't.
There's a story here. The same guy who wrote the speech where he was quoting Bane from Batman at the Republican convention. You remember that? This is the same stuff. Something's going on there. Somebody's figured out, like, we can just tell the old man a story from the from a movie, and he'll just buy it. He's not seeing any movies. I can't watch the violent stuff.
I don't watch movies. I have too much work to do. It's executive time.
Transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another. But we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
And we give it back to you, the people.
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital
are corrupt,
has reaped the rewards of government. While
all right, there we go.
Oh, my God. We talked with Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session on the Antifada this week, and he noted that part of the reason why Resistance TV is so bad is nothing could be funnier than Trump is in real life. And I think that's very true.
It's tough to parody this stuff. Folks, it's 2019. Are you still doing the things the old way at work? Start the year off right by replacing that software that causes you angst and agony every day. Find software that fits your business's needs at Capterra.com. Capterra is the leading free online resource to help you find the best software solution for your business. With over 700,000 reviews of products from real software users, it has everything you need to make an informed decision. Search more than 700 specific categories of software. Everything from project management to email marketing to yoga studio management software. No matter what kind of software your business needs, Capterra makes it easy to discover the right solution fast. Join the millions of people who use Capterra each month to find the right tools for their business. So I've been noodling around on this site, right, just before the and it's basically just like they've aggregated 700 categories. But then, like, each one has, I don't know, half a dozen different pieces of software that would work for it. They have everything from just a couple of just read off the A/B testing software, which interests me. I mean, I don't know that I'll ever end up using it, but I'm interested to see, like, what we would do to broaden the reach of the podcast. Animal shelter software, arborist software. This is just the A's.
That's cool.
If you have like a tree company, they have software that is built for you. Auto repair software. I'm just going through the B's now. Building maintenance, business card software, consignment store. If you have a consignment store, they have software that helps you run your inflows and your outflows. They have a dance studio software. Products. Employment engagement software, engineering CAD software. These are just categories. Insurance rating. I mean, it goes on and on. Check it out. It's pretty amazing. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free today to find the right tools to make 2019 the year for your business. Capterra.com/majority. Capterra, that's CAPTERRA. Capterra.com/majority. Check it out. If you run a business, any type of business, they have software for you. All right, let's just one more thing about what's happening at the border. Donald Trump, of course, I don't know if he's going to declare a national emergency to pretend to build a fake wall. But in reality, what they have been able to do is to make life even more miserable for people whose lives are so miserable that in some instances they will walk thousands of miles to get away from that misery. As you know, you cannot apply for asylum to the United States from whatever country you are coming from until you are on United States territory. You need to have 1 foot in the United States to seek asylum. And what happens is you come across the border, you say, we are seeking asylum, or I am seeking asylum. Maybe you're doing it with your kids. You get a screening. If you can prove credible fear that if you go back to your home country, you will be oppressed in some fashion, you qualify for an actual immigration court hearing. In those instances, under the Obama administration, and now I think under the Trump to a certain extent, you are released under supervision, right? You have to check in with sponsors who are living in the United States. If you can't demonstrate credible fear, you're deported. The Supreme Court established a measure in which to determine whether you can make at least an initial claim that you have a credible fear of being persecuted. And that is that you have a 1 in 10 chance probability of being persecuted. That's enough. And there's some mechanism in which they determine you have a 1 in 10 chance. Maybe a function of how many people, 16-year-olds are killed, or how many go into jail. But the threshold is relatively low for that first process, because you don't want to send someone back home to die, or to be imprisoned for an extended period of time, or to be raped, or to be held, to be kidnapped, or etc., to be beaten on a daily basis. So that has been the standard for over 30 years as to that first part of the process. Now, the Trump administration has essentially created a new interview that must take place in Mexico if you're coming in from the southern border. It employs a much higher standard that would require an asylum seeker to prove that it is more likely than not that they would be persecuted in Mexico in order to remain in the country while their case is pending. So they must have a higher standard. And now, I don't know what's going to happen in Mexico when all these asylum seekers are forced to be there. They have their family is in the United States. That's why they're trying to come to the United States. It remains to be seen. But the Mexican government has said repeatedly that it disagrees with the policy, and they argue it's being imposed on the country by the United States. This is it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. And Mexico has said they would only admit Central Americans between the ages of 18 and 60 as part of the new policy because a large portion of asylum seekers are family units or unaccompanied minors. The Mexican response could erode the potential impact of the new policy in that they will not allow, children to come in. But you're going to see a lot more split up of families in that instance, it seems to me. It's a mess. And it's incredibly harsh and totally unnecessary. But this is what this administration is about. If they have one agenda, even if it doesn't get, there's not a lot of people out there going like, I really want the There's no voters. I don't know that there's a lot of voters out there who have the level of sophistication in their hatred for immigrants that I want a policy where asylum seekers are sent back for preliminary interviews in Mexico. I just don't think that's out there. But I think there's a concerted effort within the administration. And this new book, the author claims that Stephen Miller has said, like, I don't want one asylum seeker to touch this country.
Wow. I mean, I don't think there are many voters, but there are certainly segments of capital that are happy to benefit from having immigrants be as marginalized and criminalized as possible.
Well, they're not here. I mean, so it's not just a question of capital may have that interest, but this policy doesn't further that. Yeah, this policy excludes people from out of the country.
But it definitely contributes to the marginalization of immigrants who are here.
It might. When they're all gone, they won't. I mean, this administration, this is where the Trump administration is at loggerheads with some of that. That's why the Koch brothers have an issue with it. So I think in general you're right, but I don't think that's what's animating this. I think what's animating this is white supremacy, white nationalism.
But these people are willing to put up with it because it also benefits them.
I mean, you can argue. I haven't seen evidence of that. There are people, I think, agitating to get against the Trump administration about, on the right. The Chamber of Commerce is not happy with this. Maybe they're pretending about it. But I agree with you. They want a significant number of undocumented people in this country so they can exploit them. But this is not the way you would go about doing it. You would let these people in, and then you can exploit them. They're not supposed to be working. You have them already. You can't exploit them if they're not here. And so this is just, I think, unadulterated white supremacy. And it's grotesque, but it's what this administration has been pushing for, months. Meanwhile, yesterday, I don't know if you were listening to the fun half of the program. Many of you were not, but I had an extended conversation with Mike from Pennsylvania about Kamala Harris. And he was saying that he thinks that Kamala Harris's call for Medicare for All was disingenuous. And I said that may be the case, but it's a very hard argument to make at this point based upon the way that she phrased things. However, an hour after we said that, this story came out, and it's interesting. She drew apparently record ratings for CNN, and I want to make that clear. That's why we're talking more about Kamala Harris right now than we are, let's say, Beto or Gillibrand. I mean, not as many people have announced. Even Sherrod Brown has not officially announced. Now Elizabeth Warren has. We spent some time with Warren, and now we're talking about Harris. And she is right now, the most prominent candidate who's declared in terms of the Democrats and in terms of attention she's getting. And I think, understandably, she received a 2 million viewers on CNN's town hall, which was 75% above CNN's 4-week average in the 10 o'clock hour. So there's some real excitement and curiosity around Kamala Harris. And, we played yesterday some clips that from that town hall, but also about that shed some light on her. Not just the fact that she was a prosecutor. I know there's some people who think that all prosecutors are inherently it's disqualifying. I've said in the past that, if Elliot Spitzer turned out not to have a pathology, I think he would have been a great candidate. This is a guy who went after bankers and financial criminals with, a pretty big intensity. And so, only a prosecutor is going to be able to do that. It's not so much that, for me, that she was a prosecutor. The one election I cared about in the primary last year more than any was I wanted Zephyr Teachout to be the chief prosecutor of New York State. The issue is not that she was a prosecutor, but you can see numerous instances of her disdain for any type of criminal justice reform. And you can see her bragging about policies that are incredibly punitive to people living in poverty, to people who have been marginalized, to people of color. And it's going to be interesting to see, we said at the time yesterday, if we're going to see any pushback from like Black Lives Matter folks or, folks who have been working in the space of criminal justice reform. And there's some indication that we are seeing some of that. Do we have her tweet? Do we have that tweet?
I put it in sound polls. It's Keeanga Taylor.
Who is, we've had her on once or twice. You've probably had her on too on TMBS.
Not for a while, yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see if this becomes more of an issue for Kamala Harris. She writes, Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor says, using the stick, a threat of imprisonment to get poor black people to fall in line. If you excuse this away by claiming this is what she had to do to be electable, you're telling yourself not all of us see black people as expendable. The eggs you break to make an omelet. So this is Kamala Harris's comments of using the stick to make poor families behave. Yeah, that's the video that we had played yesterday or 2 days ago when she was talking about using the stick to get people to make sure that their kids were not playing hooky. And that stick, of course, being, this is problematic stuff that I don't think the majority of Democrats necessarily care about. However, if more people like Yamahtta Taylor start speaking up who are engaged in this as an issue and begin to say, like, hey, this is very problematic because this is what her background is. She doesn't have another decade of being a state lawmaker or a federal lawmaker. This has been her career. And if the fundamental perspective she had on this was that there was a moral problem with some of these people who needed to be disciplined in some fashion, this could grow into a problem. And, the argument that Mike from PA was making yesterday was that she has no, real depth in terms of her relationship to Medicare for All. And my argument was, well, she signed on to Bernie's proposal almost immediately as a co-sponsor. And it is true that she's also co-sponsored 2 or 3 other Medicare for All light proposals.
Yeah, she's hedging her bets.
Well, I mean, definitely arguably. She was co-sponsor on a bill called Medicare X from Michael Bennett and Tim Kaine, which would just add the public option on the Affordable Care Act exchanges, which, of course, again, it would be helpful, but we're talking about that would impact at the only a 10 million person pool of people. It wouldn't help anybody outside of the exchanges with all the issues that we have with our health insurance, including cost, including the pain in the ass that insurance is. Brian Schatz would create a public option broadly for everybody outside of the to do a buy-in to Medicaid. But again, I know some people on Medicaid. Depends on where you live, as we heard yesterday or 2 days ago. But that's not the same as having a Medicare for All, one that is not a function of the states, but rather, one that the federal government would administer. So, but she said very forcefully 2 nights ago on a CNN town hall. I am for Medicare for all. I am for, and Bernie's plan calls for the slow phase out of the private insurance business.
She basically said, I think it was like, let's move beyond all that.
Right.
Specifically with regards to these private insurers. That was her strongest answer of the night.
Yes. Yeah. And understand that this would phase out, and you would still, I think even under Bernie's plan, you wouldn't necessarily have all of these, there would just be no private insurance companies that themselves are in the insurance business as opposed to maybe administering some of the government plans. Like we have that relationship with some Medicare providers, right? They pay through. But nevertheless, today there's a story out that she is distancing herself, or not distancing herself, but she's put out a statement that one of her press people have, that she's open to keeping private insurers. Now look, I actually think that here's the thing. I don't know what this tells us about what she would do, but it definitely tells us about how deeply she is committed to a vision or a policy here. If she had said the other night, look, I'm open to getting rid of private insurers, but I think there's some important reasons why you might want to keep it. Or, if there was anything that implied she's done some thought about this and has a relationship to the policy, because I think there could be arguments, like I say, for keeping some private insurance as supplemental. Certainly done others. I think there's arguments. I don't know if I agree with them or not, but there's definitely legitimate arguments.
Well, and let's make it clear, though. Bernie's plan doesn't make private insurers illegal. He just doesn't want to go through them to administer a Medicare for all system, which is not the same thing.
Well, right.
And there's no reason to go through them unless you want to. I know,
but that's not my argument. My argument is that when assessing whether she feels she has really focused on this question, as opposed to ticking off a box, these are things that you should have pretty much worked out so that you don't have to 24 hours later walk it back. That to me is suspicious. This is very reminiscent, in my mind, of Barack Obama claiming that on day one he's going to renegotiate NAFTA, and then 2 days after that we hear reports of Austin Goolsbee going up to his one of his chief economic advisors up in Canada, being out of the country. This is the way you do it. Leaking that, meeting with the Canadians, assuring them that we're not going to renegotiate NAFTA, which was a backdoor way of letting corporations know, letting the interest of the Chamber of Commerce know we're not going to renegotiate.
Right.
NAFTA.
So the difference is actually the Obama-Goolsbee move was way more sleazy because it was secret, right? This just looks more, secret in quotes. I understand. But yeah,
it was more adept. Let's put it that way.
Well, that was the second thing I was going to say.
Yeah,
sleazy and way more effective to back channel something like that. But I think I've held the position of, particularly on things like Medicare for all, where she doesn't have a long track record one way or another, and she signed on to the Bernie bill, and she gave a great answer. I was following the CNN town hall and tweeting about it and talking with people in the Discord about it a little bit, and I was like. And that was one where I said, oh, that's excellent. That's a very, very strong answer. But, such a quick reversal, it's a good time to also, re-review her donor lists and I think her just sort of basic inclinations as well. And I wouldn't have said that yesterday because I think
I was arguing I know that you were impossible to make
but conversely, not a bad bet to be wary of her commitments on policies like that.
Yeah, on the donor tip. What this says to me is that when the second she gets any pushback from the business sector, she blinks. And that doesn't bode well for the future. And you do need to look at who's giving her money.
Isn't the key to the whole problem of people supposedly like their private insurance to make whatever the government offers really generous?
Well, it's not that people like their private insurance. people like their doctors.
Yeah, they like their doctors.
And they don't want to have to change. But I mean,
I like Oscar.
Listen,
I just like the name.
The arguments about the private insurance or not, that's distinct from this. This is really more about assessing how deeply she has considered this. Like I say, had she come out and said at the CNN thing exactly what her press release said the next day when she was backing off of what she had said the night before, I would be a lot less critical of that because maybe I would disagree with the policy, but it's clear that there's been some sitting down and wrestling with the issue.
And that's actually what I had thought had happened, but in the reverse. I thought it was like she's clearly basically running a centrist campaign, and it's 1992, middle-class tax cuts, and, and then Medicare for all is the bridge to the left.
Yeah, let's throw
because
them a bone.
that answer was so clear and so unequivocal. I was like, oh, this is going to be the one, and maybe also just potentially the new mainstream of the Democratic Party. You're going to be a real outlier if you're not supporting this. So I was also, that's, I think, the way we're narrowing it. I mean, obviously it's troubling in and of itself because it's the right policy and the policy we need, but it's also, it's a mishap for a campaign that's actually had like a really smooth rollout. So that's also troubling.
She did throw in the word access, though, which should always make you suspicious when anyone says that in reference to healthcare. It is a total dog whistle.
Yeah, I that's true too. I think we got into like a Twitter fight with Andy Slavitt about that. And there was polling that suggested people like that word. And that's what I think he responded to, right? That's why you hear that word, and it's a meaningless word. But this is why when we get to the debates, or we get to a sort of a narrower race, or where things become a little bit more pointed, these type of things are going to come to the fore. And, again, it's only worth so much. If you'll recall, in 2008, it was Barack Obama who was championing the public option, but saying the mandate wasn't necessary. And it was Hillary Clinton saying that the mandate was necessary. That was their big issue, the over the mandate. But I don't know. So just a revisit on the Kamala Harris thing. I imagine there'll be more coming in the future. Meanwhile, it really does feel like the Trump administration is really trying to set the table for some type of either direct or sponsored military action in Venezuela. You heard the other day what, hopefully you listened on last Thursday, Michael gave sort of the broad outlines of what's happening in Venezuela. And I've actually been reading just a little bit of some legal thinkers stuff about people who were supportive of the use of that constitutional amendment in Venezuela, but feel that Guaido, I can't pronounce it, Guaido went a step too far. It's one thing to use that constitutional amendment as a way of saying we need to start a process to find a new president. It's another to simply say like, oh, and I found one. It's me. And it also feels like the U.S. is a little bit rusty at this. Doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like...
I want to be really clear that the U.S. Has definitely been, the 2009 coup in Honduras was backed by the U.S., what we've done in lawfare in Brazil. So we've been all over this. But this specific version of like 1980s, like kind of like, let's have the military depose somebody and set up death squads. It does seem like they're a little bit rusty.
Well, they tried it in Venezuela in 2002, right, with Hugo Chavez, but they failed.
Yeah, but it was a half-hearted thing.
The pattern in Venezuela that also is similar to now, though, 2002, there was way more grassroots support for Chavez, but it's just that the opposition hypes the Republican administration, Bush, now Trump, and it's like, we got this.
It just seems like they're showing their cards. The administration is just showing their cards in a way that we haven't seen.
I think the reason they're doing this now, though, is they're trying to intimidate the military into defecting. I think they're really trying to say, like, look, guys, this isn't just like we're going to back a couple of oligarchs and you can still keep your patronage networks with a new government, which is obviously the case. This is like
put up a picture of him with his. All right, so here's one of the ways.
Arrogant. It's Bolton, it's a miscalculation because again, I think you're right though. The Venezuelan military, whatever else you say about it, I think there is a healthy, normal human response of like, you don't get to dictate who my government is by threatening me, asshole.
And it's also, I think, one that has a certain sophistication as to like, how supported this administration is. So Bolton gets up there with a piece of paper that has one thing written on it, and has somebody done a zero in? It supposedly says 5,000 troops to Colombia. This is written like 5,000 U.S. troops to Colombia. Now, look, they're there. The idea that he is that's the way that they plan their wars is just one line on a yellow piece of paper. That's clearly a means of which to. I don't think this is for domestic consumption. I think it's for consumption from within in Venezuela. This idea that we could be providing material military support for some type of invasion. And look, it's possible he didn't realize what he was doing, but I can tell you that I did this with Charlie Kirker on the debate. I went out there after seeing Jake talk to him about his, I went out there and I wrote I can't remember what it was, but the 503C filings, and wrote that on the outside of my notebook and kept flashing it at him during the debate. I mean, this is not sophisticated psyops here, folks. And I imagine, the Venezuelan military probably has a little bit more sophistication than I do when it comes to what's actually going on. That I don't think
you're both trained by the same people.
That's right. That's right. So here is John Bolton on with Trish Reagan, and I'll tell you something. I'll make this announcement right now. If this new catchphrase of this administration catches on, I may have to go away in some fashion. I'm not sure exactly how, if it'll involve medication or what, or just go
to your happy place.
Put myself in a rocket and
I'm going to go to a Caribbean islands
but
that won't be deposed by the United States for another 10 years.
But if I see anybody on the mainstream media say the words troika of tyranny in any other way other than quoting what Bolton says, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself.
We want everybody to know we're looking at all this very seriously. We don't want any American businesses or investors caught by surprise. They can see what President Trump did yesterday. We're following through on it.
So if you think of a company like Citgo, which is owned by PDVSA, which is the state-run oil company there in Venezuela, we have a lot of those Citgo assets right here in the U.S. Is that something, for example, sir, that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. Venezuela is one of the three countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
Well, now, aside from the troika of tyranny, and of course, troika of tyranny in its original translation means they have our oil under their ground, and
I'll use that phrase. The United States, Colombia, and Brazil are forming a troika of tyranny that are trying to foment a disastrous coup. And there already is.
But you got to appreciate the fact that Bolton's out there being very explicit.
Yeah.
Right?
That does feel new to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't used to just go on the news and say it out loud that we're doing this for oil money.
Bolton said publicly, and granted it was before he was UN ambassador, but I mean, he said you could blow off how many stories the UN building, it would make no
20,
difference.
Yeah. No,
Bolton has been publicly threatening people. Yeah, Bolton's an edgelord. Bolton's been publicly threatening people for ages.
And so this could be their, setting up the American public for this, but I also think it could be they don't feel like they need to set up the American public for this. I think they also feel like they can just do it.
You don't need to set people up for bringing them together.
It's so
you would say we'll all come together in a grand coup.
It's so Trumpy. Like, remember when Trump was like, yeah, it's bad what they did to Jamal Khashoggi, but we have a lot of economic interest with Saudi Arabia, so I don't know.
One guy's life, a lot of oil. It's not even close. The only sort of the positive news, and we're seeing this maybe in the context of Yemen. Khanna has reintroduced a war powers resolution, or is about to end our involvement in the Yemen civil war. And here he is on Democracy Now! I think it was yesterday or the day before, talking about, just broadly speaking, the failures of U.S. intervention and regime change.
And criticizing that. I mean, for all of our legitimate concerns about Russian interference in our elections, where we get concerned if a journalist appears on Russian television and a member of Congress talks to them. Imagine if someone were calling the opposition in our country. We would be furious, justifiably furious. And so it makes no sense that our vice president would be calling and interfering in politics in Venezuela. What we ought to be doing is working through international institutions and laws, calling for human rights, but not getting involved in a potential civil war. And again, this is no defense of Maduro. Everyone recognizes that there have been extrajudicial killings there, that his economic policies have led to hyperinflation. But the reality is that when we have intervened in places like Syria, in places like Libya, what has the consequence has been that things have gotten worse. And for some reason, the people who have led all these interventions are still able to dictate American foreign policy. It's almost as if failure is the qualification to be part of dictating what we should be doing in Venezuela.
And that's, in addition to him being absolutely right about the repeated failures of our intervention, even ones that, if there have been any, that were done with the best of intentions, our record of success is extremely low. Did pretty good in World War II to a certain extent, obviously. But when we get into, when we're talking about non-World War situations, things have not worked out so well. Particularly when we're talking about intra-country conflicts. And so, but he also, I think, does a good job there of explaining, this is how you can be critical of a leader, and there are mechanisms in which we have to hopefully impact and push other leaders to be better, or to be gone in some fashions, or to strengthen the ability of people to have some form of self-determination. But it has to stop when it becomes some form of intervention.
Well, and again, I mean, the alternative to this coup and this right-wing force that countries like Mexico are putting forward is diplomacy. And also, I have to say, I mean, I'll get to this more tomorrow, potentially, but Bernie Sanders, like a lot of people were annoyed about his tweets because, he opposed the intervention, but still was quite critical of Maduro. And I had some annoyance with that too. But speaking, I know someone who's in contact with people in the foreign ministry of the Bolivarian government, and they were like, those tweets were great. Like, they're not expecting Bernie Sanders to come out and go like, and Nicolas Maduro should get a medal. Like, the people who are still sincere inside that government, which I think there's definitely a lot of people that are, and that a government has achieved some amazing things and obviously also had failings. They're not blind to the problems and things that need to be changed either. In fact, as usually the case, they're the ones that are the most sincere about making those changes.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if a President Bernie really wanted to undo the damage back to zero that the U.S. has done to that country and other countries in Latin America, they'd be paying reparations for all of the sanctions that they've imposed on these governments in order to make them fail.
And or the death squads that they've unleashed.
Yeah, they could unkill some of the people there, too. Why not?
All right, folks, going to head to the fun half in a moment. Just a reminder, it's 2019. Find the software that fits your business needs using Capterra.com. Capterra is the leading it's free. Look at that. It's free. Online resource to help you find the best software solution for business. It aggregates over 700 specific categories of software, from project management to email marketing to yoga studio management. Capterra makes it easy to discover the right solution fast. Visit Capterra.com/majority for free. Today, find the right tools to make 2019 the year for your business. Capterra.com/majority. It's just fun actually going through there and just seeing all the different martial arts software. I'm looking at it. Micro learning software. I don't know what that is. Capterra.com/majority. That's Capterra, CAPTERRA.com/majority. All right, we're going to head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. By becoming a member, you support the free show every day, and as a way of saying thank you, we give you extra content every day. Also, it's commercial-free, the podcast that you get served by becoming a member. And then occasionally we get some other goodies. Occasionally, some advance. No, only the members got the what do you call it? Brandon Straka video. He put up one, but mine was done from my perspective, so a little bit different. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, and chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Today is Wednesday. That means yesterday was Tuesday, but tomorrow is Thursday, and thus the Michael Brooks Show.
Well, usually, of course, we're on Tuesday, but this week and next week, Thursday, because we have been victims of the government shutdown. Tomorrow, and we're starting a bit earlier tomorrow, we're starting around 6. Bill Fletcher Jr. is the guest. We're talking about, right now, anti-austerity and labor uprisings in Zimbabwe and Sudan. We're going to give you a really sort of in-depth rundown on those situations, how these currents are playing out in different parts of Africa. Then we're going to talk about the revolutionary Amilcar Cabral. And then the first half of the show is going to be dedicated to Venezuela analysis in the post-game. We've got some classic clips to play. We have a review of my latest appearance on Israeli television with a truly mind-blowing Mayo brain. You're not going to want to miss that. This Sunday, an illicit history of CLR James and a critique of identity politics with Nigerian British writer Ralph Leonard. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get the whole thing. And there's literally a handful of tickets left if you want to come see us February 1st at the Bell House.
Jamie.
So out now on the Antifada, we have an episode we did with Leslie Lee III from the excellent podcast Struggle Session. If any of you, for some reason, have not checked it out yet, you should definitely do so. They talk about, culture from a leftist perspective. They're super good. So we finally talk about The Handmaid's Tale, or as I might like to say, The Handmaid's Fail. And we talk about why Resistance TV is so bad. And then we go into a series of movies called The Purge, which Leslie Lee turned us on to late past, I realize. But we talk about why, especially the most recent movie, The First Purge, is such a better example of resistance movie in this white supremacist capitalist hell world. So check it out, folks. Patreon.com/theantifada.
Matt?
House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne is what's available on Literary Hangover most recently.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.